Fuck me. On a movie review and franchise. Fuck that.
Bond. James Bond.
Hey everybody, Ryan McDonald here, and I'm an independent filmmaker and hot sauce maker for Tasty as Fuck. And today we have a hot take on movie news and reviews. But first, serrano pepper. Serrano pepper. That's hot as habanero, but definitely more hot than a jalapeno. So let's get into what we're going to chat about today. Last week, excuse me. Last week, we found out that Eon Productions, which has been in charge and owned the James Bond franchise, had sold their rights over to Amazon. Now, Amazon had previously owned the distribution rights for James Bond, as they had already acquired MGM some time back. So, but what they didn't have is the full creative control, and it was still underneath Eon Productions. Since been producing the James Bond films since really the beginning, and all the movies that we've seen before, as far as Sean Connery, Roger Moore, and all the way through the Daniel Craig era, has all been underneath that control. Now, what does that mean for us as James Bond fans? Before we deep dive into that and give you my opinion, let's go down my credentials as a James Bond fan. Like many other people, I've been a James Bond fan for a very long time, ever since I was a kid. And for me, that kind of begins just a little bit before the very first Pierce Brosnan film, which is GoldenEye. I do remember watching James Bond Jr. as a cartoon show. It's getting hot. I do remember watching James Bond Jr.'s cartoon show. I remember when the last movie was Living Daylights with Timothy Dalton. And then when GoldenEye came out in around 1995, I remember seeing it as a kid at the Wilshire Theater in South Ogden, Utah, a theater that is no longer there, sadly. But I've been a Bond fan ever since. I've read the novelization of GoldenEye, as well as many other of the John Garner books that he had written. I've read several of the Raymond Benson James Bond novels as well. I've read all of the original Ian Fleming James Bond novels, probably 12 or 13 of them. So I've read all of the original James Bond novels. I have James Bond playing cards. I have all the James Bond movies on DVD or Blu-ray. In this case, I have all 4 of these DVD boxes, including also then the Daniel Craig series on Blu-ray. I have James Bond coffee encyclopedia books. Coffee table encyclopedia books. I have a James Bond puzzle my wife got me for my birthday. I even have the James Bond Lego car and a Spectre ring. So when it comes down to James Bond, oh yeah, and I've also I have on VHS the original CBS 1-hour television special of Casino Royale, starring Raymond Nilsson, I believe, as the first James Bond, which is why the Casino Royale property rights were locked away from Eon Productions for so long. And the original movie started, the first movie was Dr. No. So, now that we've run down my credentials on as far as being a James Bond fan, here's my take on the acquisition and sale of Eon Productions and the full creative now rights with Amazon. So, like many fans, the big worry, I think, is that now that they have this property, what are they going to do with it? And are they going to world build with it? Are they going to branch off into a Money Punny TV series? Is there going to be a kind of a Hannibal Rising origin story type thing with Blofeld, where he's the protagonist and we see him as a child and navigate that life? Is going to be, is it going to be just a series after series? Are we going to kind of like how we feel Marvel exhausted in a sense with how many movies and TV series that they have, and kind of like there's this feeling of like of the ownership that we have around the films that we've seen so far with James Bond. However, one fan to another, if I was being completely honest, let's be fair, not every James Bond film is a good movie. In fact, many of them, if they weren't a Bond movie at all, they wouldn't really even be a good movie at all either. For instance, like Goldfinger is a great movie. I think Goldfinger is fantastically probably one of the best James Bond films, and I think it's also a great movie. But some of those other ones, Diamonds Are Forever, if you take Sean Connery and James Bond out of the movie, is it good? The book Spy Who Loved Me is a great book. One of my favorite books, actually, that I read of the series. If you took James Bond out of it, because the movie doesn't follow that, is it a good movie? Moonraker. Moonraker was a hell of a book. And in the book Moonraker, it's actually a nuclear bomb and not a spaceship at all. But because at the time, Star Wars was massively famous, so, hey, James Bond should go to space. And that seemed natural. But it's a terrible movie. And especially if you took James Bond out of the movie, it might even actually help that movie because it would make sense that James Bond goes to space. Or not, sorry, it would make sense that character ends up in space. Doesn't really make sense that James Bond goes to space, though. You know, the Eon production era, they weren't really bangers to begin with. GoldenEye, fantastic film. And the same director had gone on to do Casino Royale, another fantastic film. I think No Time to Die is probably one of the best James Bond films that were made. The choices of where the camera's going to be, cinematically, the choices of what the color palette's going to be, around the cinematography, the choices where the actor's going to be for the camera, the choices of where the stunt is going to be and where the camera's going to be for that. And also, you know, the one-take shot that's at the end of No Time to Die, where he's fighting in the stairwell. That's fantastic. But that stuff only lives really in the Daniel Craig era and not in any of the other movies before that, which makes it for 20-something movies not really the best choices overall. Look at even Pierce Brosnan's movie series. GoldenEye, as I already mentioned, is a very strong film. Action film as well. I love the fight scene that happens at the end, the fist fight scene that happens between him and Sean Bean at the end, and the way that that's cut together. The camera knows where the character's going to be, so obviously choreographed very well in the fight scene. But that's not present in Tomorrow Never Dies. And it certainly isn't present in The World Is Not Enough, which is a terrible Bond film, and also probably just a terrible film. By the time you get to Die Another Day, there's some okay callbacks to the original Bond series things, as far as like Halle Berry coming out of the water, very reminiscent of Ursula Andress coming out of the water. But, you know, by the time you get to the part where he's kind of parasailing on the icebergs, it's pretty lost. And we're back to jumping the shark again and putting James Bond in space. As much as it is kind of interesting to see or sad to see, and maybe even nerve-wracking to see Eon Production sell away their entire creative control over the Bond series, which is a series that we have grown to enjoy and love. At the same time, maybe in Amazon's hands, there might be something better on the other side of this. Hopefully, if they do put together a spin-off series, hopefully they're good. Like, I've heard The Penguin is great, but I haven't seen it yet, so I'll leave that up to everybody else. But I hear it's really good, and maybe there can be a series with Moneypenny that would be great. Maybe there's time for doing an Idris Elba spy series, but maybe he's 006 or 9 or something like that. A new spy character that really takes off with him. And then at the end of the day, mostly what I hope they find somebody who's going to make a James Bond movie and direct it the way that they've been wanting to. Spielberg has always wanted to do a James Bond movie. And in the other ones, you don't see a Spielberg oneer in almost any of the movies, minus, like I said, at the end of No Time to Die, where it's the full one-take shot. Christopher Nolan has expressed making James Bond movies as well, and maybe this is that opportunity. Rian Johnson is a great director, and for people who, when Star Wars came out and Rian Johnson was directing The Last Jedi, I was really jealous because I would love for a director like that to make a movie in a franchise that I love more so than I love Star Wars. Come to see, I guess, what are your guys' thoughts on the overall acquisition? What's next for James Bond? And, you know, what are your thoughts around that? I think that they should pull up Pierce Brosnan and make a kind of old man Bond and finish off his series. You know, can you see a retired James Bond? Kind of like a old man Logan or old man Wolverine, like they do with Hugh Jackman, and do one of those movies. And that's my take on the James Bond series. I'll be chatting with you soon.